Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. It is our weekend edition, our Roundtable, in which we will have a chance to hear from a number of our participants. And then, of course, a little bit later, we want to hear from you as well. Penna, Dexter with me, Debbie Georgatos, and these are two individuals that we've heard from so many times before. And we're going to spend some time briefly looking at a bill that is in Congress right now that would be an attempt to overturn the Hobby Lobby decision. Then, as you might imagine, we're going to spend a fair amount of our time today looking at this immigration issue. We've posted lots of articles on that, and we'll spend some time talking about that in some detail and certainly welcome your phone calls. But first of all, Penna, let me come to you because you've written a very good commentary that is available on our website. It's on our blog on the Hobby Lobby case. And how necessary is that? Because on Wednesday in the United States Senate, two senators co-authored this particular piece of legislation, dropped it in the hopper, Senator Patty Murray from Washington and Senator Mark Udall from Colorado, which would ban for-profit companies from refusing to cover any federally guaranteed health benefits for religious reasons. Really an attempt to completely overturn the Supreme Court decision.
And I know one senator that would probably vote for it because there's a piece about him in CNS News today, and it's Chuck Schumer from New York, because he said basically he was speaking to one of these women's rights, quote-unquote women's rights groups, and he basically said that you either have to pick one if you're a religious American, your faith or your business, and you cannot have your faith tenets as part of your decision-making about your business. That's a scary proposition, very, very scary. And it's interesting that these senators now, like Patty Murray and some of the other liberals in the United States Senate, are actually, because Hobby Lobby, one of the articles said, once out of the bedroom, these senators don't want to let them out. The senators want to make sure that they get to dictate what Hobby Lobby will provide to its female employees. I don't know why. You know, after the Supreme Court makes a decision like that's highly touted, it's a landmark decision. They're going to now try to pass a law. I guess it's an election year gambit, really, to try to pass a law to say, you know, we want to force companies to provide this. It must be, because they have no chance of getting this. They're not even going to pass it through the Senate, and it will be dead in the House.
Well, that's for sure. And let's recognize that this isn't just necessarily a Republican-Democrat issue. I have difficulty right now seeing Senator Manchin from West Virginia and a number of others voting for this, and they are Democrats. So I'm not even sure you can get all the Democrats to vote for it. I doubt you could get any Republicans. But I think it raises a very interesting discussion point, and that is that you mentioned it's going to be an election year. And we're hearing all the time that the Supreme Court just declared war on women, or that this is part of the Republicans' war on women. And so, Debbie, let me come to you for just a second before we get back to the case. It does seem to me that there is an attempt to use this for a rhetorical flourish and to use it for a campaign issue.
Absolutely, that is true. You know, one example that we can just says so much about how this case is being manipulated to scare and just really frighten young women voters. There was a tweet by Elizabeth Warren, who is the U.S. Senator from Massachusetts, where she wrote, "Can't believe we live in a world where we'd even consider letting big corps deny women access to basic care based on vague moral objections." And that there's so much out of that. One is that she's trying to suggest to young women that businesses can prevent you from having access to health care or access to birth control it's not about access at all. And, many misstatements are being made about the Hobby Lobby case in order to manipulate young women voters. One just being the idea that all birth control has been eliminated. Hobby Lobby is still covering, I don't know what the numbers are exactly, 12 out of 20 or something like that, forms of birth control. The ones that they don't wish to cover are abortion-inducing drugs. It's actually, there are 20 mandated contraceptives. They'll cover them all. They've been covering them all. They've been mandated to, but they've objected to four out of that. These are 4 contraceptive. They're either the morning after pill, which can work as an abortifacient, and it's these IUDs that stop a fertilized egg from being implanted. And so, Hobby Lobby does not, because they have Christian owners, they don't want abortion to be funded under their health care plan. How hard is that for someone to understand? But people don't read the news. They don't. They read the headlines and they read the tweets. And so I'm afraid that Debbie's right, that the American woman, some women out there who really are low information people are going to accept this. And so it's important, I think, that we at Point of View and just those of us who understand what this is really all about, do not let them get away with this messaging.
One of the things I've been looking for is a Rasmussen poll. I would hope soon he would go out and ask people, do you believe that the Supreme Court bans contraception? Do you believe the Supreme Court actually allowed various employers to determine what you can get for your health care? Which, by the way, could be a true statement because, after all, they do select various plans. And see if this is really having some traction. Because I think both of you women know that last time, the war on women, even though the Democratic Party used it, it might have worked occasionally here and there, but there was pretty good evidence that it didn't connect very well with some of the voters. This time, you would hope that at least the education we do here on Point of View and others would know that if you actually fund 16 of the 20 birth control devices or pills, and you have a better health care plan than most people have in America, you pay people at Hobby Lobby much more than the minimum wage, there's really nothing wrong with what Hobby Lobby is doing right now.
Absolutely not. Another aspect of this is, and it's reflected again in that tweet I just read by Senator Elizabeth Warren, she refers to the Hobby Lobby, the Christian owners of Hobby Lobby, their objection to the forms of birth control Penna mentioned, and the IUDs, as vague moral objections. And this is such a signal about the lack of seriousness and lack of serious respect toward genuine religious faith in America. The idea of, and it doesn't have to be a Republican Democrat thing, but the intellectualism out there that just dismisses earnest Christian beliefs as with a kind of a back of the hand, vague moral objections. I think that's very troubling.
Penna, one of the things I want everybody to do is go to the Point of View blog and read your piece, because there's something else you added in there that I suspect many of our listeners do not know, and that is you say the Obama administration argued that once a family goes into business, it loses its religious freedom. Well, that part of the case was rejected 7-2. So a lot of people make a big deal about this was a 5-4 decision, but when it came to the issue of religious freedom, it was, as you might say, a no-brainer. 7-2 saying, no, you don't lose your religious freedom when you go into business.
And that's the argument Chuck Schumer is continuing to make. That's what these bills that have been introduced would do, because they would disallow the use of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act to defend yourself from these edicts by the administration that you violate your faith. And you know what I think this Hobby Lobby decision did is it's raised awareness on both sides. So the left is now coming out against the right and against Christian people and people who want to live according to their faith. So we have to be more vigilant now, because even though we have a good Supreme Court decision, we also have them waking up.
Well, let me again encourage you to visit our website, and under the blog you will see Penna Dexter's piece on Hobby Lobby. It's called The Hobby Lobby Decision, but it's full of very good, sound pieces of information that set aside some of these liberal myths. And as the debate takes place about Hobby Lobby, the Supreme Court, religious freedom, I think it's going to be a great resource for you. You can click on it and then maybe even put it on your Facebook page and educate others. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to focus a lot of time and attention on immigration right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
Ed Stetzer has been following and predicting church trends for many years. He sees a number of church trends that all of us should consider. His first trend is that the word Christian will become less frequently used and will also make the term clearer. Part of the problem is that 3/4 of Americans call themselves Christians. The term obviously means different things to different people. Ed Stetzer describes 3 categories of people who call themselves Christians. Cultural Christians say that they are Christians because they're not atheist or another religion. Congregational Christians have had some loose connection with church, either a baptism or a wedding. And convictional Christians are those who identify themselves as Christians because they orient their life around the faith in Jesus Christ. The first 2 groups are more likely to stop calling themselves Christians, leaving the last group who use it in a more meaningful way. Another trend he predicts is that the nominal will increasingly become the nones. Let's go back to the categories we just mentioned. The cultural Christians are more likely to move away from the Christian faith since they aren't really committed and will be significantly influenced by the culture rather than by biblical principles. And the congregational Christians are nominal in the sense that they are only casually involved with the church and a body of believers. These 2 groups of nominal Christians will probably be more influenced by the secularism of our culture. Certainly their children will be affected by a secular culture. And apart from a profound born-again experience, these nominal Christians are likely to become one of the nones. The nones are people who say they have no religious preference. These 2 trends remind us that the world around us is changing and that nominal Christians are changing with it. It is a call for us to make sure of our commitment to Christ. We should not be conformed to the world, but we should avoid being taken captive by the culture. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join our conversation at any point, 1-800-351-1212. We have our roundtable, as we always do here on our Friday weekend edition. Penna, Dexter, Debbie Georgatos, and if you would like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. One of the articles we have posted here, Charles Krauthammer, The Immigration No-Brainer. Penna, I guess the first thing I appreciate about Charles Krauthammer is he gets to the point. I saw this when he was on Fox News the other day. He pointed out the fact that this constant refrain that we have to pass this emergency package of $3.7 billion, this refrain that if we had passed comprehensive immigration reform, we wouldn't have this crisis at the border. And he says, no, that's not the case. That's a non sequitur. Those two do not connect at all.
First of all, Charles Krauthammer supports comprehensive immigration reform, although he has to then define it.
Right.
He wants the borders very, very secure before we did anything like that.
Sure.
And he's not afraid to call it amnesty. He actually supports amnesty if you secure the border. So he's coming from that.
Yes.
Which in a sense gives this even more credibility.
Yes.
In a way. But this president, of course, has asked for this money. He won't go down there and look and see what's really happened. He absolutely doesn't want to admit that this is a crisis, which it is. And the only thing he'll do is appropriate money, and then if you try to put requirements on that money, he'll call you, hating children and not an obstructionist. But the money needs to be done smartly. I mean, yeah, we certainly need to have money because we've got all these kids that are being taken care of. But one of the things that's been used to refuse to turn them back, send them back home immediately, is a bill that was passed in 2008 that was supposed to be for sex trafficking. Krauthammer brings this up. If President Obama would either issue an order saying that bill does not apply to this, or if Congress would just vote and amend the bill because it was not supposed to apply to people just coming here for asylum or coming here to get a better life or to perhaps drag their parents along later or become voters for Democrats. It wasn't supposed to apply to that, but that's what's being used. And then added on to that is the 2012 order by President Obama that if before 2007 you came here as a child brought by your parents, then you could stay and be legal. So all of this is being twisted now, misinterpreted, and used to cause this. And it would be very simple for this president and this Congress to take a quick action. And then we would send shockwaves and symbols all the way down to Central America. The other thing Krauthammer says should be done is put them on very nice buses with lots of social workers and take them back.
Mm-hmm. And as soon as they arrive, then those that were parents that had spent $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 with coyotes to send them here certainly wouldn't have the money to do it again, but everybody else looking at that wouldn't as well. And so it does seem to me that deportation, even if you didn't do a lot of it, would send a signal. And what about the fact that here we have the Secretary of Health and Human Services on Meet the Press this Sunday on 7 separate occasions were asked, would you deport them, and never could give an answer. That sent a signal by not sending a signal, didn't it?
Yeah, it's to them, it's not a crisis or humanitarian issue. It's a political campaign PR issue, and they're trying to manage it. And it's just so obvious there. We had, you were out a couple of weeks ago, and we had Brian Hughes, who's a state representative from Texas. He'd been there. He'd just been back from there. And, of course, Texas is doing a lot and spending a lot of money. It's not supposed to be a state issue, but somebody's got to do something.
Certainly. And we had Louis Gohmert on earlier in the week talking about the same thing. He's been down to some of those. But, Debbie, I'd love to get your thoughts. It does seem to me that if we just amend this 2008 law so that we understand that we don't have to go through this long, detailed process to deport these children that were put on the top of railroad trains and snuck over the border and all those kinds of things, that we would begin to at least turn this crisis around. And we aren't seemingly doing that right now. Absolutely.
I think that's a great solution. You know, the people who are trying to stir up anger and kind of ethnic tension in America will say, if you say, send them back, that you're being harsh and cruel. But actually, for the broad common good of American society, sending the message to the world, to countries all over Central America, that we actually mean it, that we have borders, that we are going to protect them. We don't want to hurt your children, but they can't just come here. They can't overwhelm our system, and we can't have this notion that if you send your kids, you'll be able to come next. That we'll have this string immigration happening. We need to send the message that we care about our borders very much. And as to people visiting the border, I happened to learn about Matt Rinaldi, who has been elected. He has not yet begun serving, but he has been elected to the Texas state legislature. And he was down the border also, I believe, actually with Louis Gohmert. And he tried to walk over south and cross into Mexico. He was immediately stopped and turned around. Mexico has firm borders. This is not a cruel thing for a country to do. In fact, it's one of the most basic requirements in a civilized society is to have lines that are borders between you and your neighbors and to enforce them.
You know, they're saying, and the president certainly makes the point that there are problems in these countries, these Central American countries. But for Mexico or Canada, if you had young kids coming across, they would immediately be sent back. There's some sort of an exception. Krauthammer mentioned it in his column, too, that there is an exception that they're using in the law to be able to keep these kids, and actually we end up flying them other places. But, I mean, how hard is it to get rid of an exception like that? Yeah. It just can't be that hard.
And why do we have to spend $3.7 billion? You might have seen that Senator Coburn and some others did some calculations, said if you took the 52,000 children and gave them all a plane ticket, it cost us $10 million. And $10 million is a lot less than $3.7 billion, right? So, I mean, if indeed you really are serious, it is not as expensive as the president's making it out to be, unless your goal is to keep them here for a long period of time and maybe never really have the desire to send them back. And the most important piece of legislation that we've seen right now blocking that is a 2008 law that is easy to amend. And then we have people leaking memos from the Department of Homeland Security pointing out that we're less than 1% of these young people have been deported so far. There's no reason to believe that that's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, that 2008 law, as Penna mentioned a moment ago, was passed to deal with sex trafficking. It probably had a good motive. It was for non-contiguous countries. And so we treat people from those countries differently than we did from children coming here from Mexico. But early on, when President Obama indicated he was going to ask the Congress for this money, there was a hint from his administration, and we understand the problem in part is this 2008 law, and we are going, as part of our package, to request repeal, or to ask Congress to repeal that law. But then he didn't include that because there was pressure back from some in his party saying, no, we don't want to change that law. So the 2008 law gives these kids not only they get temporary relocation. These kids who are from the three countries that are in play mostly here, which are Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. They are treated differently than kids who cross or from Mexico. So these people from those other countries get temporary relocation, great assistance, extensive assistance, elaborate immigration and deportation proceedings. And part of the money that President Obama wants is to pay lawyers to represent these kids in court to deal with the requirements of that 2008 law. And I actually learned a bit about that paying lawyers. There is actually a federal law passed in 1965, the Immigration and Nationality Act, that says in Section 292 that you cannot use government funds to pay government lawyers to represent people who entered illegally. Wow. And so it's not even legal to do what they're suggesting in this $3.7 billion that President Obama is asking for.
Michelle Malkin wrote about that the other day. Just before we go to a break, we're talking about legislation, but the UN High Commissioner for Refugees says that he believes the United States and Mexico should recognize that this is a refugee situation, quote, which implies that they shouldn't be automatically sent to their home countries, but rather receive international protection. Let's hope that's a non-starter. But,
oh, my goodness.
You even had Ashley Banfield the other day. This is a thing going viral saying, these are refugees. Look at what we've done when we've helped kids from other war-torn countries. And I would say, okay, we recognize that the circumstances right now in Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras maybe aren't great, but this is not Sudan. This is not Syria. And now you have some people suggesting we treat them like refugees. And if that's the case, there is no chance we ever deport them.
Well, that's just a sign to every underprivileged person around the world that they could actually come in and just stay and get free welfare benefits.
Well, and I think that Charles Crutchammer talked about that, too, because people say, after all they've been through those dismal conditions, and what he said is, by that standard, with a sea of endemic suffering on every continent, we should have no immigration laws, deny entry to no needy person. If you start using that as your justification, I would argue that a nation without borders is not a country. And that's kind of where we are right now.
Peggy Noonan had made that point very, very well. What is a country if you don't have borders? Yep.
Well, let's take a break because I want to get more comments from you, and let's open up the phones, too, to give your opportunity a chance to join the conversation. Peggy Noonan will talk about her piece in just a minute. Also want to talk about the secrecy involved in all of this. We talked the other day about Representative Bridenstine, who wanted to go to Fort Sill and was not allowed, and now he's going to get to go tomorrow, but he can't bring any recording device with him. He can't talk to any staff, and he can't actually talk to any of these children. We've heard that some of these churches have offered to do some very helpful things, and they've been told they can't even go in there, much less help these children. So what is exactly going on? So we'll give you a chance to join our conversation. We'll continue our conversation as we are today about this humanitarian crisis at the border and how that relates to the bigger issue of immigration. We've posted lots of articles on our website. Take the time to read those, and if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We'll be back right after this.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221, or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Immigration, the issue at the moment, and if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212, talking about the crisis on the border. Penna, Dexter, Debbie Georgatos with us, and Penna, this is a crisis that I don't think is going to go away. I don't see a willingness on the part of the administration to deport, and I see a lot of people that are quite willing to enable. You can see that, first of all, there might be lawyers that will find a sympathetic judge to say any attempt to fast-track deportation is unconstitutional. That'll tie it up in the courts. Not to mention just the public relations issue of every time you turn on your television set in the local news broadcast, they talk about some conflict, some pushback, or some family that came here to avoid war-torn whatever, fill in the blank. And I think this is going to be with us for some time. Your thoughts?
Well, because they're not allowed to send anyone back. Yes, you're absolutely right. And get lawyers and courts involved, and you take a lot of time.
Right.
Get airplanes involved to send people all over the country to these various cities, and you're just not going to get most of them leaving. They're going to be staying here. And it's sad, too, to see what's just going on there. I mean, Peggy Noonan's piece, it points out what we've been saying, but you really have to think about the word crisis. Mm-hmm. It is a crisis. It's not a trumped up accusation against the Obama administration for allowing this. It's really happening down there. It's really true, and I think that's why the president has not gone down there. And she, in her way of writing, which is so awesome, she describes it. She says a reporter touring an entertainment center in Texas noted a blank, lost look among some of the younger children.
Yes.
That's why she said children who cry and wail anticipate comfort. These kids are not crying. They know deep down there's no one to really take care of them. So they're just kind of sitting there blank. They've been really abused by being sent here. And she also goes on to say, it's like you live in a house that's falling apart. The roof needs to be patched, and there are squirrels in the attic. A hornet's nest is in the eaves. The basement's wet. The walkway and blah, 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 all about what the house is like. And she says, it's always on your mind, of course, then that you could lose your job tomorrow, which is kind of a picture of our economy is not great anyway.
Right.
We can't absorb this without borrowing money. So she says you're equal parts anxious, ashamed, and angry. And then one morning you look outside and see all those people standing on your property looking at you and making some mute demand, talking about little children and all of that. And you call the people who could help you in your government. And they say, oh, we're going to pass a bill and get more money to handle the crisis. And you ask, does that mean the kids will go home? He says, no, but it may make things feel more orderly. Mm-hmm. Oh, great. You call the local TV station and they come to do a report on your stoop, and then they're gone because really, what can they do? And after a few days, it's getting to be an old story, and then no one's in charge. And that's what the buck seems to be being passed between people. And it was interesting, I thought, that Rick Perry tried to get President Obama to come down to the border,
yes.
and he didn't want to participate in a photo op. Rick Perry may have seen that as good for him and good for Republicans to make that request of the president. But I also know from speaking with Brian Hughes and from you talking to Louis Gohmert and others that the state of Texas has had to appropriate a lot of money, and we've had to put in place systems to take care of the situation because the federal government is not doing its job. So at least and that hasn't been well publicized. So the governor of the state of Texas is doing the real work of this. Mm-hmm. But the president is, he's just washing his hands of it. He's above it.
You know, that idea of the photo op, Andrew today on our show threads put the picture up there of, I won't do a photo op, and then had pictures of all the photo ops that the president has done. So first of all, that was a little disingenuous. But back to the key point, there is something that Peggy Noonan talks about, optics. And I know that word's overused a little bit, but the point is that remember how critical the entire nation was because George W. Bush did not land in New Orleans during Katrina, but just flew over. He did not want to be disruptive, and I think that was a wise decision, frankly. But he was pilloried by this. This week, we played a little montage that was put together by Grabian, and they just had person after person, Republican or Democrat. I mean, people like Henry Cuellar, as well as, Senator John Cornyn, individuals that are on MSNBC and NBC and Fox and all sorts of things, all saying the same thing. The president should go down to the border. And when he says, I know what's going on here, that gives a sense that he doesn't care and he doesn't take seriously the crisis that you've been talking about.
That's what it seems like. It seems like he just doesn't care. And I really don't think he does. I don't think he cares.
I think there's an element of this, of President Obama's involvement in this, as even goes beyond not caring, is that he has not, in the whole course of his administration, taken any steps to secure the border. Now, I'm not saying that either party has done a super job, but this whole notion of allowing many, many people to come into America who don't have the background in Americanism and what America stands for, because if he cuts this off and we stop having this flood come in, he's limited to a certain number of people, whoever is here now, and those people, however many, cross the border and become eventually citizens. These are, in the very crass political calculation by some people, these are just future voters for very big government socialist policies, because that's the kind of thinking they came with from their countries. Why they came as helpless. They came as seeing government as there to help people and save people. So I think it's almost a political advantage to him to not solve it and to have a larger number of people growing in America, a subsection of American population who come here thinking and changing kind of the political culture of America. So I don't think he has a motivation. And, it's interesting. It would be such a great opportunity for some leader on the conservative side, or just any leader, either side, to say, we have to actually solve this, and here are the steps. I noticed one little thing. It doesn't solve it all, but I noticed that Texas U.S. Congressman Lamar Smith has come out with a statement saying there'll not be a single penny to Obama until he secures the border. And he's laying down the gavel, saying there has to be no money to Obama administration until they seal the border, number one, and number two, confront illegal immigration, come up with a solution. So that's the one power at least the U.S. House has, is the power of the purse, to say we're not just going to throw money. We want to hear a real solution articulated.
Just before we start taking some phone calls, and we have quite a number, love to get your comments briefly on what we could do for the children that are here. And I mentioned the other day, and let me talk about it again, that tomorrow Representative Jim Bridenstine from Oklahoma will actually be able, for the first time, to get to visit those, if you will, refugee kids, illegal alien kids, whatever you want to call them, at Fort Sill. This is in his district, and when you tell a sitting member of Congress you cannot go to a military base in your own district, what's that all about? Now he is going tomorrow, but originally he was told he could not bring a recording device, he could not talk to the staff, he could not talk to the young children. That's issue number one. Issue number two, our good friend Tony Perkins, who was on with us this week as well, we have from his Washington update the fact that some churches have said, well, maybe we'd like to get involved. I'll just tell the story of one of these. Pastor Kyle Coffin with Crossroads Church in Tucson thought, well, let's do something to help these children. And they were told that they could not bring toys, blankets, food, soccer balls, anything to help them out. Now, I think Glenn Beck's trying to find a loophole there and trying to do that himself. But what is it with this? You cannot talk to these kids. You cannot help these kids. I mean, what happened to the kind of compassion that we as Americans would like to give?
Only the government can have compassion.
Wow.
You have to look to the government for all compassion. And I think Debbie's absolutely right that they don't want it solved. In fact, he really started it in 2012 when he made that one announcement, that executive order that said if your kids that had been here and brought here when you were young through no fault of your own, then you can have all the privileges of citizenship. Well, that's what they want. It's everything they've done since President Obama's been in office, is to expand the role of government in our lives and to move our country to the left, hard left, to transform the country. So we shouldn't be surprised that they really don't want to do anything about this. They'd rather bring all these people in, institutionalize their care, spend money to build things, institutions, whatever, to take care of the kids. And then we'll end up educating them. So it's just expanding the all-powerful state. That's what they're about. So this is just part of their agenda. When the church tries to come in and do something, they're already trying to weaken the church. We can see it even through their reaction to the Hobby Lobby decision, which we spoke about earlier. But this is just another way. The church has no ability to have a role in the nation's good.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll take some more of your phone calls. If you would like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. A very significant puzzle right now that those who might want to even minister in some significant ways to those children that are here, sometimes forced here, sometimes trying to escape violence, trying to escape, some cases, sexual trafficking, whatever it might be. We can't even send churches in, faith-based organizations in, to help them out. And that is a disturbing trend that has started to surface as well. So if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll start taking some of your phone calls as we talk about immigration and the crisis at the border. All that coming up right after this.
We've been talking about it for, well, it seems like forever. And now we have the Supreme Court's decision in the Hobby Lobby and Conestoga Woods cases. The 5-4 ruling says that the Hobby Lobby arts and crafts chain and other closely held corporations cannot be forced to subsidize contraceptives that can work by inducing abortion. The plaintiffs in these cases claimed an exemption from the Obama administration's HHS mandate that companies provide all FDA-approved forms of contraception to their employees or face punitive fines. Providing abortion-causing drugs and devices violates the strongly held religious beliefs of the company's owners. First, the court had to decide, does a corporation even have religious freedom? The Obama administration argued that once a family goes into business, it loses its religious freedom. The Supreme Court rejected that argument 7-2. The case was not about contraception, it's about abortion. The Green family, which owns Hobby Lobby, only objected to the forms of contraception that can work after an egg has been fertilized, thus killing an embryo. 4 out of the 20 mandated contraceptives work this way. The left's reaction makes it sound as if the court's decision will forever deprive women of contraception. They trotted out former Georgetown law student Sandra Fluke, who told MSNBC's Chris Matthews what this is really about is trying to figure out as many ways as possible to limit women's access to reproductive health care. The Hobby Lobby decision protects Hobby Lobby, Conestoga Woods, and other family-owned companies under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, a law President Bill Clinton signed in 1993. Yet Hillary Clinton said this decision upholding RFRA is Sharia-like, part of, quote, a disturbing trend that you see in a lot of societies that are very unstable, anti-democratic, and frankly prone to extremism. All this implies that this decision took something away from women. It didn't. Contraceptive access has been relatively cheap and abundant and remains so. Hobby Lobby and Conestoga Woods will comply with the mandate to provide contraception cost-free to employees as long as it's not of the abortifacient variety. Female employees of these companies who wanted those paid for their own before this case was decided, and they will continue doing so. This decision is not, I repeat, not a ban on contraceptives. The Wall Street Journal rightly pointed out that declining to force someone to pay for something is not the same as banning it. Women are not victims here, and, despite the rhetoric, they are not losing anything they had before. The White House issued the HHS mandate as an Obamacare regulation in 2012 as part of its War on Women election theme. The left will continue to milk it at least through the next election. Some women will buy in, but millions of women also value religious liberty and are glad to see it protected in this decision. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join our conversation today, Penna Dexter, Debbie Georgatos, and let's take some phone calls. We'll head out to Kentucky first. WDFB, Robert, thank you for calling today.
You're welcome. I have 2 concerns. One is, whose figures are we using and how are they arrived at? And the second concern is that if it takes $3,000 to get those children to the Mexican-U.S. border, and maybe this is not really germane to the whole thing, but those are not kids of poor families. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of money down there. Those are from middle-class and upper-class families.
Must be getting it somewhere. Drug trafficking or affluence or something is allowing that. You know, Robert, you raised a question I have all the time, especially in this immigration. They say there are 11 million illegal immigrants in this country. I think that number's low, but it's the one that everybody tends to use. The 52,000 figure, the 50,000 figure of unaccompanied minors, that's the one that's used. Of course, just this weekend, you had the New York Times talking about since April, counting both adults and children, 300,000. It's tough to come up with numbers because I have to be somewhat dependent on those numbers, but I will tell you in every case, and I try to say it on a fairly regular basis, whatever number they give you, I'm sure it's too low, just because I'm sure they haven't done a very good job of counting some of those, and there may even be an attempt to try to roll the numbers down so it doesn't look as bad as it really is. But what are your comments about that? Well, I guess Robert's off. Okay.
Yeah. I was just going to comment on the lack of numbers is a direct result of the lack of structure at the border.
Right.
How could we know? We have no order down there. We have kids flooding over. We have some kids who are being touched by border agents for the first time, and they're 15 miles in. There is no way to have numbers as to who's currently crossing. And even those who entered illegally. We try to have accurate numbers, but the whole point of many of them entering illegally is not to come under the radar and the awareness of the American just legal system. So we're just, the very best you can do is estimate.
But when they're saying $3,000, $5,000, I've heard some as high as $7,000, you do have to wonder. That's crossed my mind, too. If these are poor families,
how'd they get here?
Yeah, either they're selling themselves in indentured servitude or slave or sex trafficking, or they are much wealthier than we thought they were, or something. There's something that doesn't fit there, and that's a good question. As soon as I find an answer for it, I'll talk about it on air here.
Part of me wonders if there aren't organizations that are working down there to pull these kids and bring them up and funding that. You know, perhaps they are taking advantage of situations where the families are poor, and they're grabbing the kids and bringing them. I don't know.
Let's go to the next phone call here. We'll go to Missouri, KCMH. And Karen, thank you for calling today.
Thank you. I have a concern about all these kids coming in because even our foster care is so poor that I think these kids coming in, there's not going to be any accountability, and they're going to be vulnerable to sex trafficking in this country.
Yes. Let's recognize that, first of all, there are a fair number of situations that have now unfolded where there really isn't a great deal of parental supervision. For those of you that listen to or get my daily commentary, my Monday commentary is about what happened in Lawrenceville, Virginia. Just one example, and it was a good example, and I noticed that Phyllis Schlafly used it, and I used it as well, because here you had 500 kids they wanted to put in this black college. Lawrenceville, Virginia, I've been there before, about 3/4 African-American population. I think the federal government said, well, most of these people probably voted for Barack Obama. If there's anybody that's going to be on board with this, well, there's only 1,500 people in Lawrenceville, counting kids and everything, and over 1,000 people showed up at the town hall meeting, which meant everybody showed up, maybe some from surrounding areas, to protest this. And one of the things they were protesting was simply this: you're going to take 500 kids, some of whom are, and when we're talking about kids, sometimes we think about 2-year-olds and 4-year-olds, but if you've seen a lot of those that have been getting off those trains lately, they're 15, 16, 17. Just imagine putting a bunch of teenagers in a black college with limited adult supervision. Think about what that looks like. I mean, and that's why the sheriff was saying this is a disaster. Of course, they were also concerned about the diseases that had not ever hit that community. When you have young people coming in that have tuberculosis or scabies, dengue fever, chicken pox, measles, mumps, it's only a matter of time before that spreads as well from an epidemiological point of view. And so you can see why there has been a pushback from a lot of individuals around the country. And I think Karen's right. These young people that have nothing else, don't have good family connections, don't have any supervision, they could very easily be abducted, kidnapped, or coerced into sexual trafficking. Or
if that doesn't happen, the other side of it is that now we have to formulate systems to jump in and care for them. I mean, she said our foster care is not adequate to take care of this. Well, how do you even move these kids into that? They're not even citizens. They haven't been on the radar screen before. So all of a sudden you have to start paying people to do that. I mean, there's just one issue after another that's going to have to be dealt with. And you can sort of see why president's just sort of washing his hands of it and letting it happen.
Absolutely. Actually, there was the YouTube video that I watched yesterday of an African-American woman in Houston.
I saw that.
She's living near some school where these kids were going to be housed, and she commented that in her neighborhood, she said, what are we doing bringing all these, whatever the number of kids in? She was near tears saying, look around you, look at our neighborhood, look what my kids need. We don't meet our community's needs. And all of a sudden we have these, whatever it was, 500, non-citizens, new illegal immigrants in here. She's saying, who's speaking up for us? Why is it that we're not caring about the American kids first?
I was going to put that video up. I think I will now after the show here, because it just is a very good argument that already her children, for better or worse, it's just a reality, are in probably a substandard school from what I was picking up from where she was located in that particular area. So already it's difficult enough for the teachers to give good education. Imagine just now having an influx of kids that do not speak any English, probably are not at grade level, probably have all sorts of emotional issues, not to mention some of the physical and medical issues. you can't get the conclusion and come up with a conclusion that the quality of education in that school is going to go up. You know what it's going to do. It's going to go down. And she's already horrified that this is happening in her community.
Yeah, and that kind of segues into one of the points, and I'm not sure which of the articles you posted this was in, was making the point that, you know, if you can look at this situation and you are a well-off American and you're confident that your kid's academy or private school is going to remain unchanged and your neighborhood is not going to be impacted, it's easy to mouth compassionate words and say, gosh, we have to do something for these poor people. But the real impact on children and communities where the lower income, these new kids coming over the border are just entering your community, changing your public school, changing your neighborhoods, changing your community. That the real rubber meets the road is those people that have far less political voice, far less political power in America to protest this, but they're the ones most impacted, most hurt by this massive influx of people who aren't really ready to live in American culture.
Oh, that was a piece by Victor Davis Hanson, and it's called Moral Crisis on the Southern Border. And Penna, you and I have lived in California, and he has lived there for generations in a farm. And he talks about there are really two Californians. When he goes to Stanford, and he is part of the Hoover Institute, and he's on the so-called West Coast in the affluent area, he sees one California. Then when he comes back to the Central Valley, where his family farm has been there for generations, he sees a very different California that looks a lot more like Mexico. And so in some respects, he's been able to see ahead of most people what this influx looks like in various communities around the country.
We have a microcosm in the state of California because, as you said, Kerby, you and I both lived there. I mean, my parents, and probably your parents too, went there from the Midwest for the land of opportunity. And because there was this climate of growth and business, and there were conservative policies that were in power there, conservative people running the government, whether they were Democrat or Republican. But now it's become a massive welfare state and a regulatory state there. Big companies are leaving the state. People are leaving the state because they can't afford to live there. You know, a starter home anywhere along the coast in California is completely unaffordable for a young couple starting out from college or just a few years out. It's just impossible. And so that's what's happened there. So let's look at that state. Let's see, you know, even leaders in California want to implement Texas policies now because they see their states going under. Let's look at that because we are seeing this influx coming in. It will cause the whole nation to look like California.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we have a whole bank of phone calls. Those of you that can stay on, please do so, and we'll take your calls. And I know certainly many of you have comments or questions, and we would love to hear about those. You can visit our website, pointofview.net. We've posted some of those articles we've been talking about today. We'll come back with more right after this.
Across the nation, this is Point of View. For materials offered during the broadcast, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
I can't stop thinking about you. Jesus, I love you. How I adore you. I can't stop thinking about you.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Been talking about immigration, probably will stay on that topic. If we have a little bit of time before the end of the program, we'll talk about what's been happening in the Middle East. If we don't get to that today, we have already planned a special program next Thursday. We're going to talk about Israel, the Palestinians, some people that have been over there. We'll talk about that, but we might get to that today. But immigration is certainly the topic, as I look at my computer, that everybody wants to talk about, so we will do so. Penna, Dexter, Debbie Georgatos, and let's go to the state of Alaska. Susan, although it says, I guess you normally live in Oklahoma, but Susan, I think you're a public school teacher, so I'd love to hear your comments.
Well, my question is, we are going to be having, that's going to be like 45 classrooms extra of kids if they're going to educate them in Lawton. And I just wonder if anybody's given any thought to how many teachers that's going to need and where they're going to get them, because we already are short of.
That is so interesting. I never really thought of that. I mean, I think we're going to get a caller in every field, healthcare, education, medical care, whatever. Social services will be getting calls of people saying, has anyone thought of what we're going to have to do in this specific area? And there's so many, education being probably number one.
The education issue is really challenging because right now in public schools, we have schools struggling with multilingual, bilingual children or kids who don't speak English well enough to be taught in English. So the influx of kids not speaking English well, needing to use the services the schools have developed, it is just a further burden and strain on schools, and it actually strains them in their overall budgets and their ability to provide quality education for kids who do speak English. It's a very complex and very challenging issue, just language alone, let alone where they are in their learning curve.
Ooh, because English is a second language. You're going to have those teachers. You're obviously going to need more teachers. You're going to need school nurses, because you're dealing with diseases we really haven't dealt with before, some for which we maybe haven't done real well with immunization, and many of these individuals have not been vaccinated at all, certainly maybe don't even have all the kinds of expectations of public health that we've had in the United States. So, Susan, you raise a good question. Your comment.
Well, I think that it's going to be awful difficult. We only have maybe one English as a second language teacher for a middle school and a high school, and I think it's going to be really hard for these kids to even feel like they're welcome, because the classes are going to be so overcrowded.
I would think so.
Unless Fort Sill is making arrangements for teachers to come into there. And if that's the case, that would be really good for the kids, because they're all going to be together in a pretty safe environment.
Sending teachers into Fort Sill. We're going to have to talk with Representative Bridenstine after he has his tour tomorrow at Fort Sill. But, of course, that's not the only military base. There's military bases all over the country right now that would like to go back to being military bases, not babysitting agencies. And that is, again, just an illustration of how crazy this has become in a matter of just a few months. There are emptied schools, which now will have young people in them, but you won't have teachers and administrators and janitors and all of the rest, and you won't have enough adult supervision. I just have no idea what that's going to look like, but I don't have a good feeling about it. So, Susan, thank you for being a public school teacher, and thank you for calling in today.
Yeah, you're certainly welcome. Thank you.
Let's go around the roundtable. She raised just another issue. All the questions that are not even on the front of the minds of individuals that are saying, we need to be a compassionate nation. We need to welcome these 50,000 students in and put them in the classrooms and educate them and clothe them and find homes for them. I don't think anybody's even thought through what this naturally means if you do not deport them back to their home countries.
Yeah, I mean, what I can see is something institutionally built for them in various cities where they're being taken. And that's, an issue that's important when you deal with immigration, legal immigration, which is assimilation. I don't think that's going to happen. If these kids stay, that is not going to happen with them. They're going to be warehoused together in some way. Perhaps there will be some families found for them, but that's going to take a long time to find families for all of these children. And, are we going to have to pay people to take them? That could be a lot of it. So, what I see is taxpayer money being spent to warehouse, educate, and medically and feed these kids.
Wow. This is incredible.
And all that assumes that we don't find the backbone in the country to do what really needs to be done, which Charles Krauthammer's article suggested, which is we have to find the strength to say these kids need to go home. And I think that's going to be a hard argument to make. I think the longer they're here, the more accommodations we make, the more facilities we develop, the more programs, the more options for schooling and options for housing, the harder it will be for us to say, they need to go home. And I know it's going to require change in that one law, that 2008 law that impacts what rights we give people who come from countries that are not contiguous to the U.S., and that change can be made. But that leadership to do that now will prevent so much more problems in the future. And the longer they're integrated into our culture, the harder and harder it will be to ever to make that change, to send them back. And so, the expense for schools and families, it really must be assessed against the backdrop of where are we in America, where are we in employment numbers, where are we in overcrowding in schools, where are we already in the overcrowding of our assistance programs? Do we have enough? How much are they about to run out of money anyway? We're adding strain to an already strained situation, which isn't really fair to Americans and American taxpayers.
Let's take another phone call. We'll go to Georgia this time. Thomas, thank you for calling today.
Hey, how you doing? First of all, I want to let everyone know, remember that we are a Christian nation in the United States. So we have to have compassion. I heard on another station the other day that Obama did not want to go down there because he's afraid of contracting the scabies and all that. That's what a Secret Service recommended for him not to go down there. And I was in prayer today, and first thing the Lord reminded me of is life, and he spelled it out plainly. Life is for everyone. That spells life, And then we also have to remember that we're all human. And he spelled that one out for him, meaning helping unites mankind across our nations. And I hear everybody's upset about these kids being here, which I am too. But we have to get them back, and we have to start taking care of our own kids, because didn't just a few months ago they took money away from the welfare system and all that so they could get this Obamacare pushed through to pay for all the pork belly projects that our state senators and congressmen put into Obamacare? We can't even read it. They want to get rid of Obamacare, but now you're still going to be paying for all them trillions of dollars that was pork belly project up underneath that bill.
Sure. Well, again, those are conversations for another day. But, what I always say before is there's a balance here. On the one hand, you certainly want to have your compassion and treat children well. And I appreciate Charles Krauthammer saying that even if we put them on buses, let's make sure that we have the best opportunity to give them nurses and treatment and interpreters and social workers and those kinds of things. But on the other hand,
on their way back,
it's on the rule of law. Yes. So on the one hand, you got the compassion. On the other hand, you got the convictions and the constitutional issue. And what I am concerned about, and I'd love to get your comments around the table, is that right now when you see the stories that are being played, and we'll talk about this after the break, almost all of them talk about the compassion side. Very rarely do they talk about the rule of law or the constitutional issues. So we'll talk about that and take some more phone calls right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
Ed Stetzer has been following and predicting church trends for many years. He sees a number of church trends that all of us should consider. His first trend is that the word Christian will become less frequently used and will also make the term clearer. Part of the problem is that 3/4 of Americans call themselves Christians. The term obviously means different things to different people. Ed Stetzer describes 3 categories of people who call themselves Christians. Cultural Christians say that they are Christians because they're not atheist or another religion. Congregational Christians have had some loose connection with church, either a baptism or a wedding. And convictional Christians are those who identify themselves as Christians because they orient their life around the faith in Jesus Christ. The first 2 groups are more likely to stop calling themselves Christians, leaving the last group who use it in a more meaningful way. Another trend he predicts is that the nominal will increasingly become the nones. Let's go back to the categories we just mentioned. The cultural Christians are more likely to move away from the Christian faith since they aren't really committed and will be significantly influenced by the culture rather than by biblical principles. And the congregational Christians are nominal in the sense that they are only casually involved with a church and a body of believers. These 2 groups of nominal Christians will probably be more influenced by the secularism of our culture. Certainly their children will be affected by a secular culture. And apart from a profound born-again experience, these nominal Christians are likely to become one of the nones. The nones are people who say they have no religious preference. These 2 trends remind us that the world around us is changing and that nominal Christians are changing with it. It is a call for us to make sure of our commitment to Christ. We should not be conformed to the world, but we should avoid being taken captive by the culture. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
I'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Well, I put on the table something to think about, and that is, Penna, you mentioned before how it's important to whether we were talking about earlier Hobby Lobby, giving good information about the Hobby Lobby case. It would be nice to at least see some media reports that certainly are going to focus on the compassion issue, but you also have to focus on the constitutional issue. And as Peggy Noonan says in her very well-written piece, if a country does not have borders, it's really not a nation anymore.
Yeah, that's the one paper that I read every day, the Wall Street Journal, that on this issue, I'm not quite as trusting of all their information because they are open borders people in the sense of a sort of globalization and globalized economy. But they, to their credit, they have their editorial page, which is much more conservative. Peggy Noonan writes there every week. We love to get that column, and I thought she hit the ball out of the park with it. And, we have to make sense of, okay, yeah, we're going to have compassion for these people, and really this compassion coming from churches that are trying to help, that's the way to go. Let private money, church money be used for that, and then insist that the rule of law be followed. That's government's job. Their job is not to be the humanitarian babysitter daycare on the border or in cities around the country. So they can enforce the rule of law. I mean, that's Romans 13. And that's their role, biblically, constitutionally. And then, to take care of these needs that are so immediate, yes, we can have churches do so, but the churches don't become institutionalized welfare systems. They take care of needs where they're needed. And so, they did it in Katrina, and they've been doing it, and they're able to ease out of it. Government doesn't. When government does these things and starts building itself up to take care of needs, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
The concept of rule of law has been so much in the news in the last 5 or 6 years. I think it can sound like a very dry or almost irrelevant, archaic concept or something you should have learned in school in 8th grade, but you didn't. But the concept of rule of law, which is that you have a set of laws that number one, apply to everyone. You understand your obligation to follow them, and there are consequences if you don't. If you don't have that in a system, it's not just a sterile legal issue. It is a human life issue. It's a comfort in human life. It's a safety. It's a predictability about life. It is a structure to life that allows the free market system to operate. So in the case what's occurring at the border, the rule of law, a basic issue is we don't enforce our own borders, which we simply must, or as Peggy Noonan says, we're not a country. But we have, even over the years, we've had illegal immigration occurring, and we have more and more people entered America illegally, and nothing really happens there. We talk about it, and at election time, everyone claims they have a plan, but we don't do anything to actually make it mean something. That's a rule of law problem. And then now, as this large influx of people are coming in part, I mean, you can point to poverty in the countries they come from and crime and all sorts of problems, but in part, the invitation for those people to cross the border is that we have in America over the last decade at least sent a signal that we're, at least the American left has, we're thinking about amnesty. We had President Obama issue that DACA order relating to people who arrived in America before June 15, 2007. We send signals of all kinds that everyone really can come here. Somehow it's all going to become, and so even though it isn't we haven't yet announced we're going to have massive amnesty. We sent enough signals that people in countries where they see how great America is are thinking, I got to get there somehow. I'm going to get there, and somehow it's going to work out. Those are magnets, and then we turn around and we have a chaos like this, and then people clamor for change, and in fact they tend to clamor for government control and massive immigration reform, which I do not support. I do not support by the use of immigration reform. If we mean by that pretty much amnesty, that is a terrible mistake for America. We should have learned it in 1986. President Reagan said his signing the immigration amnesty bill in 1986 was the single biggest mistake of his presidency.
For sure. Let me put another thing on the table. Nathaniel, you want to help us out here because we have also passed a number of things. We have the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. Then there was a movement towards a North American Union. And Nathaniel, pick it up from there.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Yes, I have a question. Have they thought about when America made that NAFTA Act where the borders between Canada and Mexico were supposed to be open? Have they thought about that? That's why isn't that like allowing them to do what they're doing now? Because America has signed that NAFTA Act where our borders are supposed to be open between Canada and Mexico, allowing people to...
Yeah, and that was a trade issue, but okay, that goes back to 1994. Penna, you and I were doing broadcast back then. We talked about it. We had some real reservations, to be honest, about that North American Free Trade Agreement. Since then, there's been an attempt to have a North American Union to sort of blur the borders between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. The trade idea makes some sense, but some people have wondered, and I think Nathaniel's asking a very good question, as to when you start blurring those borders and not being quite as careful about controlling the borders, did that contribute at all? What are your thoughts?
I'm not sure, but I know that we had warnings about that. Do you remember Joan Vion, who used to join us all the time on those international unions? And she warned of this, that we would eventually just become one country, and it's okay to perhaps become one country with someone who's as prosperous as you, but we're the most prosperous country on this continent. And so all it was going to do was bring us down economically. Well, I mean, I think we can only look at the European Union to see that the problems that a full union of nations, of sovereign nations causes, and the adjustments that have to be made that are very, very painful. So, I can only guess. I don't know exactly, and I wouldn't be able to articulate to tell you exactly how the, NAFTA has translated into this, but certainly that whole idea of opening things up has created this atmosphere, at least. We
were supposed to have Pat Buchanan on because he wrote a piece on impeachment, so we'll probably do that. But, whether it's Kathy Adams or whether it's Phyllis Schlafly or whether it's Pat Buchanan, you mentioned Joan Vion, I can go down a pretty long list. There were some people that at the time were saying, I'm not so sure that this NAFTA agreement, which is the North American Free Trade Agreement, and then later we had the WTO and some others that try to minimize our borders, aren't at least some contributing factor to some of the border issues. And so, again, that's an important issue that we should put on the table. So, Nathaniel, thank you for bringing it out. Any comments, Debbie?
Just quickly, I think NAFTA there was talk around that time about the idea of whether we are eviscerating the lines between the countries, and we don't want to do that. But I think as to now, or any ideas like the North American Union, we need to a resurgence in America, in my view, of valuing the greatness and uniqueness of America. People want to come here. People who are down there in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, they're not trying to go to Cuba. They're not trying to go to any other communist or Venezuela, any communist country, any socialist country, because what America is the beacon. But we have to, as Americans, dig in and remember why. It is because of the uniqueness of the ideas of our founding and our adherence to them. The idea of Judeo-Christian ideas undergirding it, and then liberty and limited government and personal responsibility and all those beautiful, important concepts, the dignity and nobility of the common man, the right of the common man, the ability of common man to actually be the government, to have we the people have the power. These are unique ideas, and they made America unique. And instead of and so people come here because of those. Well, we can export those ideas. They would make any country on earth safer, stronger, more prosperous, more great, more free. And we need to be proud of those ideas, but recognize they are uniquely valuable. And we don't want in any way to dissolve lines between our country and especially Mexico, which just has a very different cultural, political, mix, a political culture very different from America, an economic culture very different. We don't want to dissipate or in any way dissolve or lose what America's uniqueness.
I wish we could export those ideas, because there is sort of a secret sauce that leads to the success of America, and I believe that it can and should be exported around the world. And I've said this off air, so I might as well say it on air. I wish we had a radio-free America. We used to send signals into the Soviet Union behind the Iron Curtain. I wish we could send some of those to people in Europe in various languages, to Latin America in Spanish and Portuguese, because there are things that will make their country successful because they've worked in making America successful. And so that's something to think about. But just before I take a break, let's go to another phone call. We'll go to Illinois. Sherry, I think you wanted to share what's going on down there in Central America.
Yes, I have some friends that were there. They were missionary friends of mine, and I worked with Hispanic people in Indiana, and we talked about this several years ago about the attitudes of the teens down there. They have been rejected, many thousands of them, and they fear authority, and some of them are very hostile towards authority. And the reason for this is, I don't know if you've heard about it, but several years ago they were talking about how the police go into the streets and the subways and all this, and if there are teenagers there after curfew, they just shoot them. They don't bother with arresting them. I don't think they have a budget for, jails or any kind of custodial things. And they're very frightened. Their attitudes are very different than the teens in this country. For the most part, it's a completely different situation, and this is going to be a real challenge to any school teacher. And having taught school myself, I know these kids, and I've taught in schools where there are people from South America and Mexico coming in. But by the way, they pick up the English language in about a month and a half.
I've got to break, but just imagine if you don't respect authority, how difficult it's going to be to educate them and even have them obey the rule of law. We'll take a break, come back with more right after this.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, weekend edition, Penna, Dexter, Debbie Georgatos, and if you would like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Lots of conversation today, some very helpful suggestions, but also quite a bit of reminder of what a very significant impact this crisis at the border will have on all Americans, not just those at the border. And Penna, before we go back to the phones, it just occurred to me that sometimes when we talk about issues here on Point of View, people listen to them, they say, oh, that's really sad. I'm sorry that happened to them. You know, we hear about an EPA ruling that affected a family that has a ranch. And you're going, well, but I don't have a ranch, so I'm really sorry for them, but it didn't affect me personally. And we find out about something that happened in a school district, a religious liberty issue that happens in Washington or Iowa, and we're going, well, I don't live there, so it doesn't really affect me. But there are two issues lately that have affected people personally. Obamacare. All of a sudden, people that before weren't all that politically involved said, wait a minute, why is the government telling me what kind of insurance I can have, and why is the government actually trying to hurt me? This immigration issue up until now has been sort of theoretical, except for people living in the border states. But as these buses start rolling into your hometown, and all of a sudden you're having hundreds of kids, because usually they drop off 500 at a bunch in your local community, and you now have to deal with it. That's another one of those issues that takes it out of the theoretical and affects the lives of listeners here that listen to Point of View every day.
You know, I think you're right. I think we need to, I hope Rasmussen does some good polling on this issue also, as far as people's attitude towards that. We already know that people are nervous about open borders and people coming across the border. And yet they want to be compassionate. And that's, I think, part of the reason why politicians don't like to deal with the immigration issue. We've got to have some statesmen here and some really tough love to take care of this. Otherwise, we're going to lose. We won't be, as Peggy Noonan said. So that's just a concept that's so sad to even think of, that we won't really have a country. Yeah. In the true definition of a country, we won't have one.
Wow. Let's take some more phone calls. I'll go to South Carolina, WAGP. Becky, thank you for calling today.
Hi. I'm just so concerned about this. We try to raise our children so they can obey the rules, and then we turn around and send them the next message when we tell them to obey the rules and do what is right, and then we turn around and let these children not obey the rules and do what is wrong. What kind of message is that telling our children, that they have to do what is right, and these children crossing the border can do what is wrong and it's okay? That doesn't make sense to me at all.
Doesn't either. Debbie, let me come to you for just a minute. I saw one of your commentaries a while back where you were talking about you all of a sudden thought somebody jumped in line in front of you at the airport or something like that. And it turned out they were in line. You didn't realize it, but you found yourself going, wait a minute, why are they getting in front of the line? Well, that's the image we get right here, is that some of these individuals who have called in this program over these many years have talked about how we have a broken legal immigration system. It takes forever, it seems to them, to eventually become citizens legally, jumping through all these hoops. And now they're starting to look around and saying, maybe I would have been smarter if I just, crossed the border and did it illegally, because I feel like some of these people are going to jump in line and they might actually get amnesty and become citizens before I do. And I've been trying to do it legally.
That is exactly the problem with many proposals that come under the broad umbrella of immigration reform or comprehensive immigration reform. The kind of proposals that say, essentially, we're changing our system and we're going to make what was once illegal, all of a sudden it's legal, and it doesn't count that you violated the rules. That really undermines the broad concept of rule of law. And as you say, and it's so true, Kerby, there are people who follow the system, follow the law for years and wait until it was their turn. And if we tell them, yeah, you know what, if you just jump in and you cross illegally, you live here illegally, you don't have permission to live here, but we're going to put you in the front of the line, you really eviscerate the whole concept of rule of law. And one great example was, I think on the show we've talked briefly about the woman in Sudan who is a Christian woman. She was Muslim, and she was actually arrested and prosecuted for apostasy in the Sudan because she married a Christian, and they viewed her to be Muslim. Leaving all the facts out of the case, the truth is her husband's an American citizen. She'd applied for a visa, and she's been sitting in Sudan waiting until for her legal permission to enter the U.S. During that time, she was sentenced to death to be whipped and then sentenced to death for the crime of marrying a Christian. And so these are the real life people living terrible circumstances around the world that wait for their turn. And if we say never mind, all it doesn't count, we're really undermining and hurting, treating unfairly people like that. And one other quick political point about all this is that, you know, all these issues are fraught with the sensitivity of political correctness and the concern that if anything we say sounds at all harsh, that you're accused of being intolerant or a bigot or in some way, racially insensitive, whatever word that would be used. We find it almost impossible to talk about tough issues because people are afraid of being labeled in some unfair way. So that's why it's going to take real leaders in this country to say, even this tough issue that largely involves Hispanic or Spanish-speaking people or people from Spanish or Portuguese or Spanish countries, that we're going to get tough with them. We have to be willing to say, yes, we're going to get tough because it's a rule of law. It's neutral. Rule of law is a neutral concept, applies to everyone equally.
We're ruled by laws and not by tyrants. And and we have to protect that at all costs. And we're having a pitched battle on that, not only with this issue, but also the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion. And, you know, I think talking about compassion and political correctness and all of that, it's just so interesting that the churches are being blocked from helping in this situation.
It's so troubling.
There's your compassion, because churches get into all the needs of the people, not just the need for food or the need for medical care or whatever. But that part of it is always left out when you talk about political correctness.
It just is so troubling. And again, I certainly want to give high marks to Tony Perkins in his Washington Update. If you don't receive that, it goes on for a page and a half, and it just reminds you again of what is happening. Also, high marks to Todd Starnes, who's covered this for Fox News. So we are starting to see that churches that want to do good and want to help are being prevented by the federal government. What's that all about? That's certainly another issue. And back to Debbie's comment real quickly, I think we should still be praying for Miriam Ibrahim in Sudan. We thought that she would be able to leave, and she is still stuck there. A time when we are so concerned about bringing people across the border. What about our Marine over there in Mexico? And you go on and on about a long list of individuals that deserve the proper attention from this government and seem to be ignored. And that's another issue in and of itself. But let's take a few more phone calls, because so many of you want to address this issue. So we'll go to Anna in Texas, KABX. And what would you like to share with us today?
Well, I just want to say real quick, that the man in the White House, our president, he can have a beer and shoot pool, but he can't go down to the border on this issue. And also, I think, the people that want to let them stay and want to take care of them, well, the congressmen and the senators and the American people that want them to stay and do that, they should have to pay for it themselves. Quit telling the American people that don't want them here, they have the common sense that they should go back. Quit telling us we have to pay for something we don't want. And just real quick, I just want to ask if any of y'all, there was a woman in Marietta, California, I believe that's the name of it.
Marietta, yeah.
Marietta, I'm sorry. She insinuated that Obama had gone down to these countries and visited, and then 2 weeks later this was happening. Do y'all have any evidence of that?
I don't have any evidence of that, but we certainly know the DACA statement. But I think that's a good point. When the president is in Colorado with Hickenlooper, the governor, and drinking beer and shooting pool, it was interesting because a very prominent Democratic representative here, Henry Cuellar, was very critical of the president, said if he has time to shoot pool, he certainly has time to come down to the border. Well, then the next day, Henry Cuellar mentioned on one of the interview shows that he was told by the White House to zip it, and that other Democrats have been told not to say anything. And so it's not just the Republicans, it's not just the Fox Newses of the world out there. It's a lot of people that are saying, oh, wait a minute, this makes no sense at all. And again, if you heard the montage that we played, 16 different individuals, and they range from people like Henry Cuellar, a Democrat, to certainly John Cornyn, a Republican, and Donald Trump, and you had all sorts of various Andrea Mitchell, and on and on. I mean, you just go through this long list of individuals, Republican, Democrat, politician, commentator, private citizen, and you go all the way down, and they were all just simply saying, President, go to the border. And again, the picture of the president the day before in Colorado, drinking beer, shooting pool, just wasn't exactly the picture that I think most Americans would expect. And we'll see how that affects maybe his opinion polls, but we're beyond that. What are we going to do to address the crisis? We have suggested that there are some answers, and one of those is to amend that law. I would suggest another. Mr. President, why can't churches help right now? You're overloading the system. These children have suffered enough. Let's give them the best care, put them on the bus, and even give them good care as we take them back to their home countries. Let's take a break. We'll come back with more right after this.
We've been talking about it for, well, it seems like forever. And now we have the Supreme Court's decision in the Hobby Lobby and Conestoga Woods cases. The 5-4 ruling says that the Hobby Lobby arts and crafts chain and other closely held corporations cannot be forced to subsidize contraceptives that can work by inducing abortion. The plaintiffs in these cases claimed an exemption from the Obama administration's HHS mandate that companies provide all FDA-approved forms of contraception to their employees or face punitive fines. Providing abortion-causing drugs and devices violates the strongly held religious beliefs of the company's owners. First, the court had to decide, does a corporation even have religious freedom? The Obama administration argued that once a family goes into business, it loses its religious freedom. The Supreme Court rejected that argument 7-2. The case was not about contraception. It's about abortion. The Green family, which owns Hobby Lobby, only objected to the forms of contraception that can work after an egg has been fertilized, thus killing an embryo. 4 out of the 20 mandated contraceptives work this way. The left's reaction makes it sound as if the court's decision will forever deprive women of contraception. They trotted out former Georgetown law student Sandra Fluke, who told MSNBC's Chris Matthews what this is really about is trying to figure out as many ways as possible to limit women's access to reproductive health care. The Hobby Lobby decision protects Hobby Lobby, Conestoga Woods, and other family-owned companies under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, a law President Bill Clinton signed in 1993. Yet Hillary Clinton said this decision upholding RFRA is Sharia-like, part of, quote, a disturbing trend that you see in a lot of societies that are very unstable, anti-democratic, and frankly prone to extremism. All this implies that this decision took something away from women. It didn't. Contraceptive access has been relatively cheap and abundant and remains so. Hobby Lobby and Conestoga Woods will comply with the mandate to provide contraception, cost-free, to employees as long as it's not of the abortifacient variety. Female employees of these companies who wanted those paid for their own before this case was decided, and they will continue doing so. This decision is not, I repeat, not a ban on contraceptives. The Wall Street Journal rightly pointed out that declining to force someone to pay for something is not the same as banning it. Women are not victims here, and, despite the rhetoric, they are not losing anything they had before. The White House issued the HHS mandate as an Obamacare regulation in 2012 as part of its War on Women election theme. The left will continue to milk it, at least through the next election. Some women will buy in, but millions of women also value religious liberty and are glad to see it protected in this decision. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. If you'd like to join our conversation, probably already have all the calls we can get to, but we'll see if we can slip in a few in just a minute. And it is our weekend edition. Debbie Georgatos, let me come to you for just a minute. You've been looking at some polls, and I think we also are concerned about the fact that when young people come here, or when even adults come here, the process of assimilation that is supposed to take place sometimes does and sometimes does not. It means something to be an American. We come from all sorts of countries around the world historically, but to be an American means something. But if people come here and they don't sort of assimilate or adopt those ideas, we lose the ideals of this country, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's a just I think a truism that in America, compared with most countries in the world, our country's been stable and secure and relatively on track for 200 plus years, and people can get lulled into the complacency that says America can never change. We're just assuming it never will, no matter what happens. but thought leaders matter, what's influences of thought matter, and pure numbers matter. And how people we bring into our country, if they become part of our school system, part of our culture and our communities, they can change, and America can change in bad ways. So quick statistics, this is from a Harris poll, talked about 81% of native-born citizens think that schools should teach students to be proud of being American. So a vast majority would think that they should be taught that.
Which is good. I'm glad it's 80%. It should be 100%.
Should be 100,
but I'll
yes.
take 81. I'll take 81.
But only 50%. Only 50% of naturalized U.S. citizens do, and I wanted to say this point once. Naturalized means they came here, they were Hispanic by background, came here to America, and they are now citizens, but only 50% of those think that students should be taught to be proud to be American. Other just alarming statistics about how differently people can think based on where you came from. We have one that was about capitalism. We have 55%. Over half of Hispanics in America, these are naturalized citizens, have a negative view of capitalism, which means free markets. Even self-described liberal Democrats, only 47% don't like capitalism. So these are people who just don't have the goodness and greatness of America's or understand where it came from. There are numbers like that about Obamacare, how the vast majority of Americans do not like Obamacare, but Hispanics do. Even Asians who are new citizens to America like Obamacare. And there is the lack of, or just the lack of history that has helped them, cause them not able to appreciate how important those things, basic American ideas are, so they don't embrace them. Another one was gun rights. There are two more quick ones. One was gun rights. And it was something like only 27% of naturalized Hispanics support basic American gun rights. It's a tiny percent. It's very alarming. And the last one has to do with the Constitution and the importance of the Constitution in governing America. 67% of native-born Americans say our Constitution is a higher legal authority than international law. Again, should be 100%. But among naturalized citizens in America, only 37% think that. They don't see the importance of the Constitution. So countries can change if people we bring in don't know what made America great.
That's amazing. You know, again, as I've said on this program before, but let me say it one more time. If all I knew about gun control, if all I knew about capitalism, if all I knew about democracy is what I experienced in my home country, I probably wouldn't be very high on those issues either. If you've seen gun violence in Latin America, you would think that I really don't want to have Second Amendment rights. If I've seen crony capitalism, whether it's in China, since you talked about Asians coming here, or crony capitalism in Latin American countries, I wouldn't like capitalism. And so if they don't come here and see the value of our First Amendment rights and our Second Amendment rights, the value of a free enterprise, then you do have a different country, because then they will vote for candidates who want to take away those rights. True?
You know, you mentioned, Debbie, naturalized citizens and these statistics, which are, I think, very telling. And, you know, these people have come here mostly because they want to come to a better place and have a better life. And they've gone through it's a hard road to become a citizen. And I know a lot of people that have done it from various countries. But, you know, I look at my friends that have become citizens here. Some of them have taken the trouble and time to learn about our system. And they would be among those who voted, yes, capitalism is a good system. But there are many who, even coming from perhaps European countries that are more socialistic, it's just hard to have a conversation with them. They may be Christians. They do not get it. They don't get why America works. They just think it's better here. And they don't understand that there is a real shift in forms of government that's allowed us to be better. And so, you know, it takes an educational system that starts in grade 1 that teaches true American history, that lets kids read the literature that shows them the principles of our nation of freedom. And we have that being taught in this one track in the Christian schools and the home schools in this country. Thank God.
Yes.
Because those kids still understand, and they will be able to lead the country if there are enough of them. But we have this huge public school system that does not do that. And then the schools of education do not do that. So we're just generating more teachers that do not teach the greatness of America. And so, you know, eventually, I think it's already, it's coming back to bite us now. And we may not be able to turn back from it.
I was thinking of an application point is for everybody to, if they haven't already gone out to see America the Movie this weekend, to do so. We had Dinesh D'Souza on a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about the book and now the movie. And it's just a reminder that he, as an outsider coming from India, came here, and he said, I would probably had a pretty good life in India. I could have been a doctor like my father, could have been an engineer like my uncle, but my path was pretty much set. But when I came to America, it opened up all sorts of opportunities. For example, he's a author and a speaker and now a film producer and so many other kinds of things. And it is just a reminder that there is something that works in America. And instead of trying to change America to the rest of the world, we should say the secret sauce of what has made America great, and that is limited government, a free enterprise system, all sorts of rights that are guaranteed to you, First Amendment rights, Second Amendment rights, Fourth Amendment rights, and so many others are the things that should be exported around the world. And Debbie, that's been your argument. And instead of importing all of these illegal alien children, let's start exporting some of these ideas around the world.
Absolutely true. And actually, it starts at home, the kind of reappreciating of what made America great, because we are losing it to some degree, as Penna was talking about in the public schools. A lot of conservative activists are now more actively involved in day-to-day assessment of what's being taught in the public schools. Are we off track in what we're teaching about America, its greatness, its history, its exceptionalism? And it's a great place to be active for people who aren't actually politically active. Just in your school, insist your school and your students in your area, they learn the greatness of America. And they are, because if we don't know it here, we can't hold on to it because we don't know what it is.
Well, just about out of time. Let's mention some ways in which people can read both of you. First of all, Penna, we have your blog today. So we go to the Point of View blog. It's actually your commentary, which people hear on the Moody Broadcasting Network, and they can hear it on the Bot Radio Network and certainly a number of others. And so that blog is there. And Debbie, I thought I might mention that you have a website. I've mentioned one or two of your commentaries, and also you, of course, have a book. So where do they find that?
My blog site is ladiescanwetalk.org. And you can, on that website, order my book if you like. The book is called Ladies Can We Talk? America Needs Our Vote. It's available on Amazon. It's available in English and Spanish and also on ebook on Amazon. So you can find it there, but ladiescanwetalk.org. And you can actually email me at ladiescanwetalk@gmail.com.
And I might just mention, if you say, wait a minute, that all came too fast, we have a little button there that says Today on Point of View. And if you click on that, you'll see the picture of Penna Dexter, and you'll have all her information. You'll see the picture of Debbie, and we have all the links there to the Twitter account, the Facebook account, and everything. So if you didn't get all that down, it's all right there on the website. And so it's a one-stop shopping for anybody that's looking for more information. Posted a number of articles today. I encourage you to read them. And first of all, Penna and Debbie, thank you so very much for joining the program today.
It was fun.
Thank you.
We will do it again, but certainly we have to say goodbye and encourage you over the weekend to get together with your family. But next week, we're going to be spending some time talking about all sorts of issues. Warren Smith will be with us, Mark Bailey of Dallas Theological Seminary. I also mentioned Gary Frazier. Tim LaHaye's going to be here. He's got a new book out on Revelation. He'll be with us for just a half an hour, but we'll be talking with him as well. So all sorts of great conversation that will be taking place next week. So we hope to see you back on Monday. I want to thank Andrew and Catherine and Chris for their help behind the scenes. Have a great weekend. See you back here in just a few days.
You have been listening to Point of View. For materials offered on the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.